Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining this webinar. You're in the right place if you're here to talk about delinquency and default. We are going to just wait a couple of minutes for folks to join, and thanks again for coming. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in just 2 more minutes to allow some more folks to join. Thanks for coming tonight, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Okay, good evening, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining tonight. I know it's late, but we were trying to accommodate some folks after the workday, so appreciate you making time tonight. My name's Amy Salata. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at Protect Borrowers, formerly the Student Borrower Protection Center. We just rebranded as of yesterday, and so if you didn't recognize that name, that's why. We rebranded to Protect Borrowers in order to better encompass the work that we're already doing and expand our work a bit. And so we're really fighting to build an economy where debt doesn't limit opportunity. We investigate financial abuses, take predatory companies to court, and push for policies to protect working people from debt traps. And so we're aiming to deliver immediate relief to families while building power, driving systemic change, and fighting for racial and economic justice. So we're going to continue doing all the student debt work that we were doing, but also expand a bit to other forms of household debt because we know that, all these things are related. I'm really excited to have you all here. Thanks for joining again. I'm gonna share my screen right now. We are going to be covering delinquency and default tonight. So, this will be incredibly high level. And so, really aimed at people who are in delinquency or in default and need to figure out what to do. And so this is kind of a great primer to figure out maybe what your next steps are. In addition, we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. And so I will try to get to as many as possible. And if I don't know the answer, I will absolutely get back to you in a follow-up email. In addition, we'll be sharing the slides to this presentation and the recording. This is being recorded. And a follow-up email should go out tomorrow afternoon or so. So stay tuned for that. And everybody who registered will get that email. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and feeling like you're taking too many notes, this will come in the form of a recording and in the form of a slide deck. Let's look at this agenda here. Okay, so we've got an overview of what delinquency and default are, how to check studentaid.gov to figure out some of your next steps, options for folks in delinquency currently, getting out of default, an overview of what collections looks like, and then we'll get to your questions. If you have questions during the webinar, if you could kindly put them in the Q&A feature, I'll be checking that at the end to see what folks are, or what questions are coming up for folks. And I'll get to as many as I can. And yeah, if I can't answer them, then I will put them in a follow-up email. So I guess without further ado, let's get started here. So first, an overview of delinquency and default. So delinquency happens when you have missed a single payment on your student loan. So it's really just after 1 month of missed payments by the required due date. It'll start getting reported to credit bureaus after 90 days or 3 months of missed payments. Um, it's easiest to help a borrower before they get in default. So if you're on the call right now and you're in delinquency and you've missed a few payments or you've missed more than, 90 days of payments, it's a great time to kind of be addressing this because you have more options right now than you will have if you're kind of heading towards default. So that's something to keep in mind if that applies to you. For default, folks are considered in default after not making a payment 270 days or 9 months of missed payments. Again, it's easier to help someone before they're in default, but certainly we're going to lay out options for folks in default as well. The consequences of default are pretty dire. So, it can affect your credit. What that means is that you might not be eligible to get a loan for a car or get a loan for a house, or, get an apartment. So it can affect all sorts of things. The ripple effects of this are quite large. You can also be subject to collections. Servicers or student loan companies can sue you and pursue you for that money. You can't get federal aid to go back to school. And so if you're interested in pursuing a master's degree or something or finishing your education, you can be denied federal aid. The collection costs also are very expensive. I think this is something that we hear a lot, that it's very expensive to be poor. And so, it's really expensive to be in default too. The government can also pursue you forever. They have very extraordinary collection powers. And so that includes, getting your tax refunds, withheld. And so if that happened to you this year, that's an example of kind of collections restarting, is that if you were expecting a tax refund in April and you didn't get one, this might be the reason why. Or maybe you already know that if you're on the call. Administrative wage garnishment, which we're expecting the Department of Education to announce the start of any day now. So this is something that advocates are keeping an eye on. And then also federal benefits being offset, in addition, including, if you're a federal employee, you could have your, paychecks garnished in that way, that you could have, some of your payment withheld, or other, benefits. Okay, so let's go to checkingstudentaid.gov because this is really going to be your clearinghouse for everything that you need to know in order to figure out your next steps. So for those of you unfamiliar with studentaid.gov, this is the clearinghouse for all things related to your federal student loans. Studentaid.gov is the government website that basically tells you what sort of loans you have, how much you have in student loans, when your next payment is due, who your servicer is, all sorts of things. If you've ever consolidated, if you're interested in consolidation, that's where you would go to do this. So I'd encourage everyone, even on this call, to go to studentaid.gov right now and take a look at your dashboard. This is what it will look like when you get to your dashboard. And here you should be able to tell if you're in delinquency or in default. And something like this will come up if you're in default. So you'll have sort of a banner at the top that says you have X number of loans in default, and this is what it looks like. Delinquencies will appear on your servicer site, or you will have gotten notices in your inbox about being past due on your servicer site. So just to clarify, so studentaid.gov is kind of this government clearinghouse for all things related to your federal student loans. All of those federal student loans are kind of contracted out to companies that are managing your loan. So that's your servicer, like Mohila, Ed Financial, Nelnet. These are just to kind of name a few. But so these are the different companies that are kind of tasked with managing your student loans. And so delinquencies will appear on your servicer's website. So first, you could go to studentaid.gov, figure out who your servicer is if you don't know yet. that'll appear, I think, on the side, on like a sidebar. It'll tell you who your servicer is. Then you could go to your servicer's website, log in there, and see, how many days they're saying that you're past due. You might have inbox notifications saying, you're 30, 90, 120 days past due. And so, these things will appear in different places. So defaults will appear on studentaid.gov. Delinquencies will appear on your servicer site. Okay, the next thing I think that would be good to do at studentaid.gov is figuring out what type of federal student loan you have. This is important because it'll affect some steps that you need to take if you are in default and who you need to contact. And so you can log into studentaid.gov. I want to also pull up this slide again. So I think the main difference here is figuring out if you have a direct loan or a FFEL loan. And you can figure that out by what it says on your dashboard. So if it says direct next to your loan, that's a direct loan. Direct loans have been the main loan type since 2010. So if you took out a loan for your education since then, it likely is a direct loan and it'll say direct in the name. It doesn't matter if it's subsidized or unsubsidized, you're really just looking for that word direct. FFEL loans are a loan program that predated the direct loan lending program, and that stands for Federal Family Education Loan Program, or FFEL loans. These loans will just say FFEL next to the loans. And so I just want to go back to this slide again. You can see here that this person's dashboard, they have direct loans. They consolidated their loans at some point, so they have a direct consolidation loan, or two in this case. And so you're really just looking for that word direct. It'll be that simple to figure out whether or not you have direct or FFEL loans. And here's another kind of example of what this looks like. So here's, two different types of FFEL loans that that come up on a person's kind of if they downloaded their aid data on this slide, which you can do. It's a little bit of a difficult, weedsy report if you end up doing this, but it'll look something like this, and you'll also be able to tell from that document, what type of loan you have and who your servicers or your guarantee agency is, which we'll get to in a little bit. Okay, so that's a little bit about studentaid.gov. That'll come back up in a little bit. But let's move on to what folks can do if they're in delinquency. I think I want to mention at the top of this section that for folks who are in delinquency or in default, step one should really be figuring out, and this will come up on a later slide too, but step one could be figuring out if you qualify for any sort of cancellation program. So that includes, closed school discharge or disability discharge. Folks that qualify for those programs are often disproportionately in default. And so checking first to see if you qualify for absolutely any cancellation program, might save you a lot of time and effort. So doing that first would be helpful. I think in that bucket of what you should do first is also consider that some folks on the call might be eligible for bankruptcy. We're not going to be diving really deeply into bankruptcy tonight. The Biden administration did make some changes that made it easier for some folks to access bankruptcy with their student loans. And so I want to mention that because if that's something that you think that you might be eligible for, based on like what you've read online or something, I think it would be good to contact an attorney and see if that is an option for you. But in any case, the first step is really figuring out if any of these cancellation programs apply to you, because that would be amazing if you could get your debt canceled instead of remaining in default or in delinquency. So let's move on to some other options for folks in delinquency. So remember, delinquency happens if you have missed one payment on your student loans and your credit score, the credit bureaus will be notified after 90 days of missed payments. So for folks in delinquency, you basically have three options at this point. So you can apply for an income-driven repayment plan, which we'll get into what that means. You can seek out a forbearance or a deferment. So let's start here with income-driven repayment plans. Okay, let's go over just generally some different types of plans that folks could be enrolled in at this point in time. When you leave school, your loans are automatically placed in a 6-month grace period where you're not required to be making payments. After that 6-month grace period, your loans are automatically put into something called the standard plan, which is right here at the top left corner. This standard plan has a term of 10 years. It has you paying off the entire balance of your loan over 10 years. And so you can imagine that if, a person has a very large balance on their student loans, that monthly payment might be incredibly unaffordable. And so, this is the kind of plan that everyone's put into in the beginning, but there are options to kind of move into other plans that we'll go over now. So the next plan is the extended repayment plan. This has you paying off the same amount over a longer period of time. So those monthly payments might be, a lot lower than they would be on the standard plan, but it's just going to take a lot longer. The graduated repayment plan in this bottom left-hand corner has you starting off at very low payments and then going up to very high payments. And the loan terms, it depends on the timing. We are going to be spending the majority of our time talking about income-driven repayment plans, which are this bottom right-hand corner. And basically, they are pegged to your income and not to the total loan balance. And so if your income goes up, your payments will go up. And if your income goes down, or if you, unfortunately, like lose your job or something, you may be able to qualify for a $0 monthly payment. And so, this kind of fluctuates depending on your income. We're going to spend the majority of time talking about income-driven repayment plans because there are a lot of benefits. And folks on the call, if you're interested in something like public service loan forgiveness, you know, income-driven repayment and PSLF kind of go hand in hand. And so we'll get to that in a moment. But, these two other plans that I mentioned, extended repayment plan and the graduated repayment plan, do not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So that's just something to keep in mind. But these IDR plans do. Okay. Uh, IDR plans, as I mentioned, set your monthly payment based on your income. You could be able to qualify for a $0 monthly income, or I'm sorry, monthly payment. A nice thing about the income-driven repayment plans is that the remaining balance is canceled after 20 or 25 years in repayment. So if you remember when President Biden was in office, you might have been hearing, news stories about folks getting their debt canceled. Much of that was through something called the IDR account adjustment, where they were making sure that these folks who have been in repayment for a very long time and have followed all of the instructions on the IDR plans were getting their debt canceled, as they should have been under the IDR plans. These were also set up this way because, folks were getting, it's a very distressing thing to be making your monthly payment each month, but then logging into your account and finding that, your balance was continuing to balloon. So they set these payment plans up so that after 20 or 25 years, the rest would be canceled because, these balances were just kind of like a runaway freight train, right? Like it was very distressing for folks. So a lot of changes have been made to the IDR plans over the past few years, and things continue to change because of court cases and all sorts of things. But I guess all to say that after 20 or 25 years in these plans, as they currently exist, you should be able to get your debt canceled. As I mentioned, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is the program where if you work for a nonprofit or a government agency for 10 years and you make your payments on your student loans during that time, you can get the remainder of your balance forgiven after 10 years. And so income-driven repayment plans are often the most affordable option for folks. And so they can keep more money in their pocket while, kind of getting on this path towards cancellation through public service loan forgiveness. Okay, there are 4 types of income-driven repayment plans as of today, September 10th, 2025. These things are in motion, but let's kind of review what this looks like. So these 4 plans are listed at the bottom. There's ICR, IBR, Pay as you earn, which is PAYE, and then Saving on a Valuable Education Plan. So the SAVE plan, as you may have heard, or maybe you know from experience, is currently blocked in court. The SAVE plan was the most affordable payment plan that President Biden announced during his presidency, and it really cut people's payments in half. It offered a shorter timeline to cancellation for folks. It was really a lifeline to a lot of people, and a lot more people qualified for $0 monthly payment under this SAVE plan. It was blocked in court because 18 attorneys general sued the Biden administration, saying that this plan had gone too far. So this thing is still held up in court. And what that means is that folks that were on the SAVE plan, this one in red at the bottom, which is 8 million people, are currently in a forbearance. So they're not required to make payments right now. But that time also doesn't count towards something like public service loan forgiveness, where you have to keep paying to get credit towards PSLF credits. Interest also started accruing on the save folks for in the save forbearance. And so I know this is a lot of information, but just wanted to give you some background on why this save plan is blocked and why it's in red right here. Some other things that I want to mention for folks is that the ICR plan is currently only available for direct loan borrowers, and pay as you earn is only available for direct loan borrowers as well. And so depending on what type of loan you have, it might affect which plans you could be eligible for in the moment. This is all true as of today. This has been changing on a weekly basis at sometimes. There will be new changes that will be implemented because of the reconciliation bill that passed earlier this summer. And so the Trump administration is currently engaging in something called negotiated rulemaking to implement some of those or all of those changes that were passed this summer through reconciliation. And so for new borrowers, a lot of this will change. And so I guess I'm just mentioning that, this is not stale as of this moment in time, but we recognize that things have been changing pretty rapidly. And we will be doing some more webinars focused particularly on those reconciliation changes and what it means for new borrowers, and what it means for folks that are currently in repayment. But that's kind of outside of the scope of this presentation today. But all to say that these are the plans that are currently available to folks interested in income-driven repayment. Okay. So another option for folks that are in delinquency is a forbearance. A forbearance, allows you not to make monthly payments on your loans. And so that's, the upside. The downside is that interest still accrues on your loans while they're in forbearance. And you don't get credit towards some of those cancellation programs that I mentioned, particularly PSLF or IDR cancellation. And so, those are kind of the downsides of forbearances. They can be granted for 12 months at a time. If you're interested, you need to contact your loan servicer. So figuring out who your loan servicer is and requesting a forbearance is how you would go about that. You could also request a general forbearance if you're temporarily unable to make your scheduled monthly payments for these kind of finite reasons. So the reasons listed at the bottom here. So yes, so this is the kind of the gist of what a forbearance is if you are seeking a forbearance. Deferments are very similar to forbearances. You don't have to make payments during that time, and some loans don't accrue interest during during deferments. So they could be a better option for folks, but you might be able to get a deferment for one of the following reasons. And so these, are a little bit stricter kind of parameters on what you can ask for a deferment for. And so don't worry, again, you'll get these slides, so you don't need to be kind of scrambling to write down these different reasons for a deferment. But the process is the same, so you would still call your servicer to make a deferment or request a deferment, and they might ask you for documentation to verify the category of deferment that you're requesting. So they might request additional information. Okay, let's now move on to getting out of default. Okay, so getting out of default, borrowers essentially have two different options. The first is that they can consolidate their loans. Consolidation is a process that happens on studentaid.gov. Basically, it is similar to refinancing your student loans, but consolidation happens with the federal government. And so essentially, you're taking out a new loan with the federal government, you're paying off your old loan, and now you have this new consolidated direct loan that qualifies for, different payment plans, PSLF program. And so, uh, this consolidation is just a process that you would go about with the federal government. You can only consolidate a limited number of times, depending on how many kind of new loans that you have in the mix. There's a little bit more on another slide later, but this happens at studentaid.gov. So if this is something that you're interested in and you qualify for it, that's where you would go about doing this. So there are eligibility limits to consolidation. So you can't consolidate if you have a judgment in your name, including a default judgment. So, if a student loan company took you to court and you didn't show up to court and they, got a default judgment, in your name, that also kind of falls into this category of not being eligible for consolidation. If you have an administrative wage garnishment order, you can't qualify for consolidation, and then you can't consolidate a direct consolidation loan unless you have another additional loan to kind of add to the mix, to like consolidate again. And so that's what that means by, you can't, you only have a limited number of times that you can consolidate loans in order to get out of default. Okay, so this is what it'll look like at studentaid.gov. You'll go to studentaid.gov, find the place where it says consolidate my loans. And the application process looks like this. It takes about 30 minutes online. It's not too onerous. And during this time, you'll choose the loans that you want to consolidate. You'll be able to view the interest rate and the amount of your new direct consolidation loan. In addition, you'll be able to choose an income-driven repayment plan during this process, and sign for the loan. So it's fairly simple to consolidate your loans. As I mentioned, you can choose an IDR plan at the end of this process. You have to apply for an income-driven repayment plan or make 3 consecutive payments in order to kind of get out of default. And so again, these IDR plans are the ones that are currently available to folks, excluding the SAVE plan. Okay, so we went over consolidation. The second option for folks that are in default is rehabilitation. Borrowers can only use this option one time, and this process is a little bit, it takes a little bit longer than it would if you were going to just consolidate. And so, something that happens is that borrowers must make 9 payments over a 10-month period to prove that they can kind of successfully get out of default. So there's this monitoring period where you're making payments. And those payments are 15% of your discretionary income, and it has to be a minimum of $5 for that monthly payment, or you can negotiate an amount based on your expenses. These rehabilitation parameters are changing with the reconciliation bill. Folks will be able to consolidate twice, but the minimum payment will go up to $10 a month. So that'll change next year likely. But as of right now, folks can only use this option once. Once the rehabilitation is completed, their loan will be transferred to a servicer and you can get on a payment plan from there. Okay, again, for eligibility, you can't rehabilitate if you have a judgment in your name or if you've previously rehabilitated in the past, as of today. Okay, so if you're interested in rehabilitation, this is where the type of loan that you have comes into play. So if you have direct loans, you can contact the default resolution group. This is their information here. And if you have FFELP loans that are in default, you need to contact your guarantee agency. A list of guarantee agencies can be found here at this link. And once you get this slide deck, you can look at that link and figure out who your guarantee agency is. But you should be able to tell on studentaid.gov as well who your guarantee agency is. Okay, a couple more things about getting out of default. So technically, people also have the option to pay your loan in full. We're just gonna, we recognize that that's not an option. That's not a real option for most folks. Maybe if you, recently inherited money and you can pay in full, that's amazing. But, just wanted to recognize that that is technically an option, but, we know that most folks probably won't be able to do that. You can negotiate a settlement. It likely won't be, pennies on the dollar. It'll probably be pretty close to the amount that you already owe, but that is an option for folks to negotiate a settlement. Here is the part again where like if you qualify for a cancellation program, like closed school discharge. So if your school closed, check out the parameters of the closed school discharge program. If you have a disability and you might qualify for disability discharge, check out the parameters of that program, to see if you might qualify there. You can also stop or reduce involuntary collection by raising defenses like identity theft or financial hardship. One other thing that I want to mention on this slide is that, we recognize that there might not be, getting out of default might not be the best option for everybody on this call or everybody in default. Some folks, likely if you're likely to default again and your financial situation hasn't changed, and there are a limited number of times that you can rehabilitate and a limited number of times that you can consolidate, staying in default might be the best or only option for some folks on the call. So, I also wanted to mention that too. All right. Let's review what collections looks like, and then we can get to your questions. Okay, so I think I mentioned at the top of this call maybe that collections resumed for the first time in 5 years earlier this year in May. And so uh, lots of folks are finally feeling the consequences of non-payment, after 3.5 years of a payment pause, after an on-ramp period where folks didn't have to make payments, or if they didn't make payments they weren't experiencing some of the negative ramifications of non-payment. And so this is all kind of coming down the pike right now, and is starting to feel more real for folks. So that includes, there was some back and forth about whether Social Security benefits would be offset, and that has been paused for now. Secretary McManus said that that won't happen, but tax refunds did fall into this category. And so, if you were expecting a tax refund in April and you didn't get it, it might be because of the collections that were restarted. If you are a federal employee and you had federal salary and benefits, those can be offset as well. And then wage garnishment, as I mentioned, is supposed to begin any day now. And, we're all kind of waiting for that announcement to be made. Okay, borrowers should receive a notice prior to the initiation of the collections process, but there's only one written notice issued for tax seizures. And so you can imagine that if, people have multiple addresses in a year, and your address isn't up to date, this written notice might not have gotten to you. And so, you should be notified. But if you are a person that moves around a lot, just kind of keep that in mind that you could have received a notice that you didn't know about because maybe you don't live at that address anymore. You do have an opportunity to respond and prevent collection. And the amount that's taken is 15% across the board, except for the tax refunds, which is all of the tax refunds. So all of your tax refund would have been offset if that applied to you. Okay, so there are some protections here. So for Social Security benefits, they protect up to $750 a month, which is $9,000 a year, which, we recognize isn't a lot of money, to cover your rent and your food and doctor's appointments and all those things. But the government can only seize payments above this amount per month, and no more than 15% of the total benefit can be offset. Um, or I'm sorry, SSI can't be taken because it's a means tested benefit. And so other things that are means tested also cannot be, they're also protected, like SNAP or TANF, things that are based on your income and your means. Okay, you can appeal and contest collections, but you have to act quickly, and request a review or hearing to hold the offset process. You can also challenge benefits, offsets, and wage garnishment for reasons including financial hardship, disability, eligibility for loan discharge. If this is something that's happening to you and you received a notification recently, I think, please contact legal aid or get a financial coach that can kind of walk you through these things, if this is happening to you and you're already in default. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, so I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll take a look at these questions here. Okay, so we're getting some questions about wages being garnished. Or sorry, taxes being garnished. So there is a way to contest this, but I think that it would involve getting legal help or a financial coach in order to kind of walk you through what to do. Um, let's see. Okay, there's a question about how do I determine which IDR I'm currently in? There are a couple of ways. You could go to your servicer's website and look at what income-driven repayment plan you're already in. You might have something in your inbox. So with the IDR plans, you need to recertify your income every year. And so, that notification might tell you what IDR plan you're already in. You could also call your servicer, which I know is kind of a Herculean task depending on your servicer and how long you're able to wait on the phone. But you could call your servicer and ask which IDR plan you're currently in, and weigh your different options with the IDR plans. Okay, some other good questions here that I wanna. Okay, so we're getting a question about free legal aid options for borrowers who have to have a lawyer look at their specific situation and give advice. Yes, I can send along some information on this. But if you look at the National Consumer Law Center, they have a borrower assistance page that has some legal aid options. But you have to qualify for legal aid. And so if you don't qualify, then there might be a few other options for folks that I can send some resources out on. Okay. When did we begin accruing interest again? In 2025 or since 2020? So I mentioned interest starting to accrue on the save forbearance folks. So if you're one of those 8 million people that is currently stuck in the save forbearance, that interest started accruing in August of 2025. The other interest began accruing on your student loans, I think in 2023. I'm pretty sure when the payment pause ended, or maybe 2024. And so it definitely wasn't in 2020. I think it was in 2023 or 2024 after the payment pause ended. There's a good question here about are state tax refunds seized for defaulted student loans? I think that the answer to this is no, but I want to double check and I can include this in the follow-up email tomorrow on state tax refunds. Thanks for asking that question. I think it's a really good one. Okay, I'm not seeing any new questions just yet. If folks have more, feel free to chime in. Okay, someone again asking about the slides being available. Yes, I will share the slides out and the recording after this call. Again, we're getting this question about state tax refunds seized for defaulted loans, and I will get you this answer in writing tomorrow. I'm not sure, but it's a very good question. Okay, we've gotten a question about the save forbearance ending, and how will payments be determined if we don't know our new repayment plan yet? So I think I want to check on this answer as well, but I think that you'll likely be forced into a different income-driven repayment plan. And so it's a bit hard to estimate what those payments might be because the payment calculator tool at studentaid.gov is not really functioning at the moment. And so I know some of our partners at EdCap have a different repayment tool that might give you a ballpark amount of like what your payment might be under different plans. And so that might be helpful to you. But you know, there's 8 million people in the same boat, and I wish I had a better answer for you at the moment on like what this looks like in reality. It's a really frustrating time. Okay, so this is a very good question that just came through. So even if the 20-year IBR program is followed, will you have a taxable event at the end? Okay. So President Biden, through the American Rescue Plan Act, made it that act made it so that there would be no taxation on loan cancellation, student loan cancellation, through the end of 2025. This is something that Congress did not extend. And for some folks, particularly if you're in the income-based repayment plan and you are seeking disability discharge or death discharge, that is not a taxable event. Under the statute, public service loan forgiveness is never a taxable event when you get your loans canceled through public service loan forgiveness. However, if you're specifically trying to get your debt canceled through IBR, through the IBR as an income-driven repayment plan, um, that is at risk of coming with a giant tax bill. And so that is one of the fears right now, that if Congress doesn't move to change that, that folks could be slammed with a giant tax bill if they get their debt canceled through the IDR plans. And so this is a great question that, like, as of right now, there is no plan to change that. But that's something that's been in place for a few years now, and so I feel like it's hard to take benefits away from people. So something to keep in mind moving forward, that if you are seeking income-driven repayment cancellation through IBR, which is the only plan that is currently offering cancellation as it stands, uh, that could land you with a giant tax bill after December of 2025. That's a great question. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so I am going to get back to you on the state tax refunds being seized for defaulted loans. I don't know the answer to that question, and it's a great question. And I will review other questions, and if there's any more information that I have, I can share that with you in a follow-up email tomorrow, where I will give you the slides and also the recording. So thanks for hanging out on this call for a late night. Please let let reach out if you have other questions. And thanks again. All right, have a good night.